One man's war is another man's opportunity. That seems to be the thinking in China right now. President Xi Jinping is hosting the Belt and Road Summit. He's trying hard to save his pet project, but West Asia is also on his mind. On Thursday, Xi Jinping met the Egyptian Prime Minister in Beijing. As we mentioned, Cairo is a key mediator, so any discussion with Egypt is important. And what did Xi tell him? Well, two things stand out in China's statement. One, a ceasefire. Xi Jinping says ending the fighting is a pressing priority, which means he doesn't support a ground invasion. No Western country has called for a ceasefire yet, so clearly Beijing has a different policy. And point number two, Xi Jinping called for implementing the two-state solution. He said it's the only way out of this cycle of violence. Xi's message was later reinforced by his foreign ministry.
First of all, China is shocked by the attack on Gaza hospital, which resulted in heavy casualties, and we strongly condemn it. China calls for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the war. Relevant parties should fulfill their obligations under international humanitarian law, do their best to protect civilians and avoid humanitarian disasters.
So what is China's game plan here? For starters, they do not consider Hamas as terrorists. Well, neither does India, but India did call the attack a terrorist attack. China did not. China's response was limited to condemnation, and since then, the stance has only toughened. First, Beijing criticized Israel. They said the attacks on Gaza went beyond self-defense. And now they want a ceasefire. They want Israel to stop the war. I know it seems like China has picked a side, but on paper they haven't. They are technically neutral in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Just like in Ukraine. China is neutral there in Ukraine, but with a pro-Russia tilt. In West Asia, China is neutral with a pro-Palestine tilt. The question is why? Well, one reason is the big power politics. Israel is America's closest ally in West Asia, meanwhile China's allies are on the opposing side, the biggest being Iran. So it makes sense for China to be pro-Palestine. They have tried to build relations with Israel, but every time the US intervened. Washington has pressed Israel to keep China out. They now update the US on major deals with Beijing. The Israelis do that, meaning they effectively need America's permission to work with the Chinese. So Israel is a bet that has not paid off for Beijing. But the Arab world is different. If you back Palestine, you get favors in the Arab world. You get their political support, and China needs that because most Arab powers are American allies, like Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar. This could be China's chance to drive a wedge in that relationship. Xi Jinping can say, look at the US and look at China. The US is helping Israel bomb Arabs. Meanwhile, China wants to protect them. Does that mean that Beijing would support a broader war against Israel? Well, maybe not, and I'll tell you why. China is the largest oil importer in the world. They buy around 10 million barrels per day, 10 million barrels of oil every day. If the war spills over, oil prices will shoot up, higher prices equal higher payments, and Xi Jinping would not want that, especially with his economy struggling. Another factor is the Belt and Road Initiative. Around 18 West Asian and North African countries have signed on. If the war spreads, the BRI will hit a dead end. So China will be hoping for a peaceful settlement. In fact, they're sending a special envoy to the region. His itinerary is not clear, but the envoy will visit West Asia next week. His job is to work for a ceasefire. Now, Beijing doesn't have the sort of clout that America does, not in West Asia, but sometimes it's not about knowing everyone, it's about knowing the right ones. Let me explain this. China has excellent relations with Iran. Tehran is betting on China and the global south to beat Western sanctions. And that gives Xi Jinping a lot of leverage. The same Iran holds the key to escalation in West Asia. If Tehran wants, it can contain its proxies. Now, Egypt has a different role. They can mediate to get the hostages out. They can also send aid and support into Gaza. So Beijing could play an important role in this conflict, and Xi Jinping has shown keen interest in playing peacemaker. He mediated between Saudi Arabia and Iran earlier this year. He was also trying to work on the Israel-Palestine conflict. He tried his hand at this earlier this year. The chances of success are low, but we say it's a win because anywhere China is not starting a fire is a pleasant surprise.